Like once you learn how to sell, you got that skill, you'll never go hungry. Your family will never go hungry, you'll never miss a mortgage payment. Once you know how to sell, you're valuable.
Hey guys, it's Matt Haycox here, and today we've got a change of scenery. We're on location with Nick James in Birmingham. Nick's a friend of mine, and I've been in one of his masterminds for the last, I don't know, probably three or 4 months now, and I've been looking forward to kind of getting Nick on camera with you. I actually used to watch Nick's content online before I got to meet him, and before I joined in the masterminds, and I know it's stuff that really kind of resonated with me, has certainly benefited me before knowing him, and very much benefited me. Now we work together. So really excited he's here today. Nick's business is the Expert Empires. It's also the Elite Closing Academy. He's a mentor, he's a trainer. He puts on big events, brings big names into the UK. Probably a lot more. So I'll throw it over to you, and you can tell everyone what I've missed out, and tell us how it all began.
I'm gonna have a look at that, and my kids are gonna fucking hate me. Because now they're going, all of a sudden I'm now gonna have to like do chores. But yeah, thanks for inviting me on the show. Always grateful for any opportunity to kind of share the message, if you like. Don't really know where to start. I suppose, yeah, I don't want to bore you with loads of detail, but being in the kind of personal development, self-improvement world since I was a kid. So, you know, at 12 years of age, I was at a Tony Robbins seminar in Hawaii. You know, I count myself very lucky to have had the opportunity and exposure to, you know, amazing people like Tony and other great trainers from a very young age. The reason was my mum was a trainer for Tony's organisation, and so she invited me to go and participate in some of the events that he was running. And I don't know if anyone watching the show or listening knows of Tony Robbins, but it's probably fair to say that he's the kind of world leader in that space, in performance and psychology and self-improvement, self-development. So yeah, from 12 years of age was attending his events, and I guess when you grow up in that environment like I did, it's unlikely that you're ever going to go into what you would deem to be the norm. I suppose, you know, I was surrounded with people that were entrepreneurial, that had successful businesses, that didn't live by the kind of normal rules that everyone else seems to. So I was exposed to a different way of thinking, a different way of living from a very young age, and knew that I always wanted to run my own business, but didn't really know how I was going to do that. And like I said, really grew up in that environment, going all over the world, which I do count myself very lucky to have been in that world, in that industry. Travelled all over the world throughout my teens, and in my early 20s, kind of started to get the bug, the hunger for running my own business. Actually did something that I really recommend a lot of young entrepreneurial types do, which was starting my first business. Complete failure, of course, the first one. Didn't have any clue what I was doing, didn't have any formal business education or training, and failed dismally, and then actually went and got a job with a successful entrepreneur. So I was working in sales for a small entrepreneurial organisation and learnt so much in a very short space of time. Because, you know, I think often having a job gets a bad rep. It's like, oh, you know, if you have a job, you failed. And I actually think that's the opposite. I think you can learn amazing things working in entrepreneurial organisations. So I was 18 months working with a guy that you've, I'm sure, come across, Andy Harrington. Yep. Great friend of mine. He was really my first real mentor that I worked with closely. So 18 months working in Andy's company, I learned pretty much everything I needed to know in order to be able to go out and start my own business. Can
I just take a pause there, yeah, before we go on any further, because I just want to catch a couple of these things while I guess we're still in the right time zone. Yeah. So you first got exposed to Tony Robbins at 12. Your mum was a trainer for him. How was that initially as a kid? I guess you know, was it something that you were interested in and you enjoyed immediately, or initially, or, you know, was it like being dragged on work trips with mum and dad, and who's this guy? You know, when did you really buy into him?
Yeah, well, it was more, I think, curiosity. My mum had, and I often share this story at events from stage, like she'd been through a real change and transformation in her own life, from being in, you know, corporate career, single, not happy, you know, like not looking after herself physically and emotionally, to like literally transforming her life in a very short period of time. So, you know, like to me, I went like, what has happened to this woman who's my mother? Like, she's like just living at a completely different level. And so,
did you appreciate why? I mean, you're 12. Did you appreciate why, or did you say Mum's had some changes?
No. I think you know, I knew she would always explain what she was doing. I knew that she'd been to this seminar and she'd been here and been there. And then she invited me to go along. And you know, I often tell the story as well. I go, look, you know, I was 12 and I didn't really know what I was letting myself in for, but the opportunity to go to Hawaii for 2 weeks when you're 12, or stay at your nan's in Birmingham and go to school for 2 weeks, it's not really a difficult decision to make. So went off to Hawaii for that first seminar, and it just opened my eyes, and like literally, you know, it showed me a completely different world that I then became literally obsessed with. I wouldn't want to count how many days, weeks, months I spent through my teenage years all over the world, attending, working at Tony Robbins seminars. Like, I mean, we're probably in the 10, 20, 30 weeks really? Over a period of a few years. Like, you know, I was out of school a lot, which, you know, I wouldn't necessarily recommend you jack in school and go all over the world on personal development events. But I do think that when I look back, you know, how much of what I've managed to do in business over the last, you know, 10, 12 years, how much of that came from the experiences I had as a youngster, as a teenager, versus what I learned at school. And it's probably 80-20 in favour of, the travel.
Talking kids in education, and I was going to say, I had a bit of a plan here, but I'm going to come up with about 100 other things we're going to talk about on the journey. How old are your kids?
They're 6 and 10.
Okay, so maybe not so much a 6-year-old, but with the 10-year-old then, how much, I guess, influence or you know, stuff that you've done in your younger life, or stuff that you do in this business, have you started to kind of impart on them? I mean, obviously, other than the fact that, you know, you're his dad and, you know, osmosis happens, if you like, but, you know, how much do you actually start to talk about things and try and break things down at this stage in life?
Yeah, I think it's funny because you could look at it from parent to kid perspective, but also, you know, anyone who's ever been to any kind of personal development, wealth creation, grow business event or training, or watch stuff on YouTube or listen to podcasts, like, you start to get excited about it. And then of course the instant reaction, and I did this too as a youngster, is to go and start telling everyone else how blooming good it is. And often there's friction. And so I think what my mum did, which was brilliant, was she never like tried to tell me or force it on me.
She just show you it so that
the best advice I could give is be an example, and then people start to, by osmosis, they start to become attracted to, you know, to learn whatever it is you've done. You know, in the same way that somebody gets, like, you know, goes from unfit, unhealthy, overweight, loses loads of weight, and they're in the best shape of their life, people start asking, how did you do it? Like, just automatically, that's human nature. And I think, like, so coming back to your question about with my kids, I definitely don't like force feed them personal development material. No, I mean, look, I'm sure automatically, because I've been around this for so long, I'll say certain things or behave a certain way that probably by osmosis they pick stuff up. But, you know, I don't force anything on them as such. I kind of let them find their own way. And, you know, I love having them at my events. So, you know, and they do, I'm not sure I should say this on camera, they do, you know, come out of school. No, but, you know, we always let the school know. We say, hey, you know, they're taking a day, 2 days out of school to come to my event. And, you know, it's all about positivity, and it's, well, I mean, we don't actually tell them that it's a business growth event, which is really what it is, but, you know, it's about positive mindset, and it's about being ambitious and entrepreneurial, and the, you know, this, I'm not saying that the school, the teachers are actually really supportive of it. I think, you know, the official line is that they're not supposed to go out of school in term time, but, you know, and I don't force them to do that, but they love doing it and they love being around it. And I think, you know, for me as a dad, it's great for them to see what I do, and it really fulfills me. But also, you know, for me, when I was a kid, being in that environment was inspiring to me, and I think it's a good thing. And funnily enough, I've also, for my oldest, there have been a number of seminars, events, workshops for kids that he's been to as well. Funnily enough, through somebody who was in Mastermind. who does that. That's what he does, you know, day in, day out in his business. So, you know, I got him involved in some of that, and again, didn't force him. I said, hey, you know, this is happening. Like, it's on a Sunday, you're going to miss football. Do you want to go or not? And he went, yeah, I want to come and check it out. And he loved it. Now, he doesn't miss football every week for it because he's obsessed. But, you know, I think it's given them choice rather than forcing it on. And that's the case whether it's your kids or family members or friends. Like, as soon as you start trying to force your views, your experiences on people, they immediately, naturally will become resistant. But I think if you can be an example and demonstrate, you know, there's a lot of my friends who, you know, I knew growing up, funnily enough now, work in our company. And they never had any idea of what I was doing in my early 20s, mid 20s, late 20s, early 30s. Then of course, but the more the business grew and the more successful I became, then of course they start asking questions. And so tell me more about it. And, you know, some have started their own businesses as a result of it. Some have joined our company because they want to be in the environment. So I think it's better to be an example, and then people are they're magnetically attracted to want to learn more.
I mean, I guess when it's, you know, when it's friends or almost like third parties, you probably, I don't mean don't care, but, you know, you don't need to be under that pressure to, you know, to force things on them, and it doesn't matter whether it takes them 6 months to buy into it or 16 years. Yeah. I guess, you know, with your kids, I guess, you know, you're striking that balance between not pushing it and allowing them to you know, take on their own stuff, but then also thinking, listen, you know, I kind of know what's best for you to a degree. How do I get it on you? I mean, Harley's, she's 13 now, so we're getting to the, you know, the school bits of picking the options, and you can drop this and you can drop the other. And, you know, I find myself, you know, I always try to be as liberal and friendly a dad as possible, but then, you know, it's like, where do you strike that balance? And I, you know, now she wants to drop this, she wants to drop the other. It's like, fucking hell, Harley, you've got literally nothing left to do. And like, I know you love your horses, but, you know, try and take some things from me, like you've dropped the piano now, you've dropped the tennis now, you've dropped the French now. And, you know, take it from me, and I always like to say, you must look at me and know that I'm not like a normal dad, you know. I'm not trying to be boring for you, but I promise you, in 10 years time, you're going to look back and you're going to go to a party, or you're going to regret that you can't play the piano, or you're going to go to a foreign country and you're going to regret that you can't speak French. And I've started to try and, I guess, add a bit of compromises. I start to give her a lot of books now, that you know, books that I read, and I'll say to them, look, you know, you've got to pick the ones I give you. I'll try and pick ones that are going to be with a bit of content relevant to what you do. So obviously she's a 13-year-old who loves her Instagram and wants to try and do YouTube and stuff. So I said, look, you know, obviously I'm in a good space to help you with all this stuff. I can either introduce you to, you know, to the right people, or I can help you get some growth, or I can, you know, let me give you some books that I've found useful to me. And it's like, oh well, I don't understand this, or I don't understand that. And, you know, and at what point do you give them space, and at what point do you start to try and push something? I guess there's no right answer.
Of course there isn't, and for me it's balance, you know, like forget like trying to encourage your kids, you know, to get into personal development and all the sort of things we've talked about, but even just like sports, like the amount of pushy parents that think they know better and try and force them down a lane, and actually it's detrimental to their development. Versus, of course, you can be completely the opposite and be completely aloof, and then you're not supportive, or you're not holding them to a higher standard. Like, where's that middle ground? And I really think it's a balancing act, because I don't think anybody wants to be a pushy parent, but no one wants to be aloof and accept, you know, let's face it, we all want the best for our kids. So you want to push them, but you don't want to be too firm and too pushy. And I think whether it's kids or whoever, I think people are always going to get the best outcome if they're reaching conclusions and making decisions of their own accord, with maybe a couple of nudges from you in the right direction. But it's finding balance, isn't it? We've all been guilty of being pushy. I have too, and we've all also probably tested in the other direction and not been supportive enough, and it's finding the balance.
So I've been trying to bribe her. So her big passion is horse riding, which I mean, she does it 6-7 hours a day. I mean, literally 6 or 7 days a week, 6 or 7 hours a day. And you know, she'll do everything from just go and sit there for 2 hours and brush the horses' tails to, you know, she'll clean their shit up and everything between. So she's certainly not, you know, as fortunate as she is with it. She's not like a spoiled kid with it. But you know, she's starting to appreciate how much it all costs. So I'm saying to her, listen, some of these bits you need to start paying for yourself, but you know, these are the things you can do to earn some money. So she's got one of those Go Henry credit cards. You know, have you seen them? It's a credit card for the kids where the parents can put tasks on it.
Okay.
And when they complete the task, they tick it off on their iPhone, or it's got an app, and then it drops, like, you know, it drops some more money in. So I'm
gonna have a look at that, and my kids are gonna fucking hate me because now they're going. All of a sudden, I'm now gonna have to like do chores. But to be fair, they're pretty good.
It's pretty cool. You can set up whatever you want on there, and you can monitor it. So I've put things on there. But what I've said, she goes, give me some tasks to do. So I said, well, look, I'm going to give you tasks that I see as, let's say, beneficial to, you know, to the bigger picture. So there's no point me paying you to tidy your bedroom, or, you know, like paying you to do your homework. So I've put on there a reading list for her, which is books that I would see as easy-ish for someone, not easy-ish, but, you know, not too difficult for someone of her age to read, and stuff that would be beneficial to her in what she does. You know, that I've started paying for. Well, I probably made the mistake that the first book I gave her about 2 months ago was Think and Grow Rich. Right. Okay. Because I just read it at the time, which I was surprised I'd never read it before, and what staggered me was how relevant that book, you know, 100 years on or whatever, and that if you look at anyone, you know, in our space, in any kind of personal development space, or any, you know, business influencers today, all the content they talk about is just repurposed Napoleon Hill from 1920, whatever it was.
I say it all the time, there's very few genuinely fresh ideas.
Yeah, just
it's mostly regurgitated and reframed, if you like, and you know, put into your own words. But yeah, Think and Grow Rich, that's a monster of a book to give a first time round.
So she starts.
I remember reading that in my teen. I couldn't get into it. Well, I remember it was so dense and so heavy. It's like, yeah, tough.
Well, she really never got past the first 2 or 3 chapters, and I tried to sit down with her to explain them or put them into context. But then she was like, "Well, can we move on to another book?" So we had to give up on that one. And I think she said, "Oh, I'd like to read Pride and Prejudice." I was like, "There is no point in me paying you to read books that you already want to read." You know, the whole point here is you've got to pick them from wherever. Yeah. But anyway,
there's some really good ones that are metaphorical. There's personal development messages woven in, but they're more metaphorical stories. So yeah, that might make it easier.
I've given her the Gary V collection now. I think she's about to start jab, right hook.
Yeah, great. Yeah, my another thing as well. I do think you've got to look at, you know, for your daughter, but for anyone who you might want to nudge, who's in your life that you might want to nudge in a certain direction. Like, look at what their preferred mode of getting information is. Because I don't read books. I don't like reading. I don't like sitting there and reading books. But I'll listen to audiobooks and podcasts, and I'll watch videos, and I go to events. That's how I like to get information. So I think...
Do you take it in as well? Do you think you take it in as well on an audiobook as you do on a read book?
Well, the fact is, if I try and force myself to do something I don't like doing, I'm not going to do it consistently. Okay. So, and really, it comes down to the book itself. So, yeah, I mean, and also for me personally, you know, I'm very busy, and finding the time to sit and read is more challenging than I've got time on the way to the gym, on the way back, on the way to the office, on the way back every day, when I can be listening to audiobooks and but there's some that I've listened to and shut it off after half an hour, just think it's too boring, doesn't really land with me. And then there's others that I've listened to again and again and again because I love them so much. So I think you've got to, rather than trying to force, you know, we talked about forcing beliefs and opinions and stuff on your kids or on people. It's the same thing with method, like mode of taking in information. Like, what's going to work best for her? She could listen to an audiobook while she's, you know, whatever she's doing with the horses, like, you know, brushing the horses or whatever. Yeah, that's a couple of hours where she could be taking in information. Maybe. Now, she might not enjoy listening either. Like, it might not be for her. But I think you've got to find the right mode for yourself. And I'd say this to anyone watching or listening, of course. They've got the option here, which is perfect. Like, you got to... I do think that in our industry, it's like reading is good and not reading is bad. And actually, you go, look, as long as you're getting what you need, does it really matter? If you read it in a book or listen to it or go to a seminar or watch video or whatever your preferred mode is, I think you've got to find what's right for you. I love going to events. Like I've always, and that probably is because at 12 years of age, that's how I started. But I think you just got to do what's right for you.
Well, let's rewind back to the journey. Andy Harrington, you worked for him for 18 months.
Yeah.
What were you doing?
Sales, which is, anyone who's either wanting to start a business or has started a business and is wanting to grow it. The number one skill set that will set you apart, that is the difference, in my opinion, between success and failure, is sales. That's it. Like, you can sell, you will, there's a few caveats, assuming you've got a product or a service that people actually want, and you've got the ability to get it in front of people, which ain't that hard. As long as you need to be able to sell it, that's it. And I spent 18 months working for Andy in sales. I always say this, it was the best, in terms of learning, probably the best 18 months of my entire life still to date, because my learning curve was so steep, and it gave me a skill that still now to this day I rely upon every single day. So I do think that, especially getting into sales, if you're wanting to start a business, getting some sales experience, especially if you can do it on somebody else's watch and get paid for doing it, is a great way for you to get started. Especially, I was very young. Like, there was no way I was going to start a business I'd already tried and failed. There was no way I was going to start a business at that point and make it a success.
What was the business you tried to start and failed?
So I'd been in the personal development world since I was 12, and I went, and I still believe this to be true, that I had such an advantage as a teenager going through that. And there's a lot of teenagers that don't get exposed to that kind of information, that kind of mindset. And so I went, at whatever I was, 20, 21 years of age, can take that information, having learned it for the last 8 years, 9 years, to young people. Okay. So I set up a business as a youth coach. So I thought, I'll go and speak in schools, I'll coach teenagers one-on-one, get the parents to pay for it. It's needed. It's something that's needed out there. And I still believe that's true. And I do think that actually, if I was to do that today, I could make a really successful business out of it, knowing what I know now. But back then, I didn't have the first clue about business. And I managed to get one client, which was a referral and introduction from my mum, because I didn't have any idea what I was doing. And before long, one client paying a few £100 a month, that ain't a business. And so when I had the opportunity to go and work for Andy, I took it because I didn't really have much of the choice. But it turned out to be the best decision I ever made, because first of all, it taught me a skill set that I had not got. And if I'd had it before, probably would have been able to make that business a success. And second of all, it put me in an environment, because I was around a guy and became very good friends with a guy who'd built a successful business and knew what it took, understood marketing, understood sales, understood building a team, understood the financials, really knew what he was doing in a business. And also there was a team of us working in his company that were all, because the business was a training company in personal development. So the people that were working there all had the same mindset. We were all very ambitious. We were all high energy. We all really cared about making a difference. So it put me in a great peer group, a great group of people that were aligned with where I wanted to go.
Tell me, on sales, just sticking on sales for a minute, would you put relationship building and being good at sales in the same category, or do you see them as two separate things? The reason I ask, relationships is something I've been talking about a lot lately, and I've got sales teams that work for me, and I'm always very good at sales, but I also say to people that I don't think I'm a technically good salesperson insofar as you've got your elite closing academy, you've got days of courses. I probably would fail if tested on all of the kind of tactics and stuff you teach.
But you're a great relationship builder.
Yeah, my answer is, if you've got a product that people want to buy and that you believe in, which I think is fundamental anyway, no matter how good you are at sales, unless you want to be dodgy, you've got to have a genuine product that people want to buy. If you're prepared to work harder than the next guy and you're good at building relationships, which is what I've always done, I think you tick all the boxes. Now, do I know all the tricks and tactics? 100% not, but I guess I've always succeeded by having by putting the extra effort in to be a nice guy with people who get on with me and working a bit harder. But do you teach relationship building in with sales, or do you almost see it as two separate things?
I think there's a few different levels to that. So ultimately, everything you've said, relationship building, sales, we differentiate between selling and closing massively. They're two very different things. But all of that is communication. That's it. It's the ability to communicate. And, you know, you've become very, very good at building relationships, which is a part of communication. And probably by default, I think you're probably a lot better than you give yourself credit for, because you've probably learned, been doing it so long now that you've learned it like almost by accident. Like you probably couldn't teach, here's the structure of a sales conversation and how you close, but you can naturally do that to a very high level. But I do think that relationship building is key, but really we're talking about communication. We're talking about being able to communicate with people, build rapport, ask great questions, use certain tonality. All of these things contribute, great communication contribute towards selling. So really, I suppose you've got relationship building, you've got sell. So relationship building is creating that rapport and that liking, that trust. Then you've got selling, which is the ability to present the product, the service, the features, the benefits, the pricing. And then there's closing, which is actually being able to get the damn money in the till.
Yeah.
And if you're deficient in any one of those three things, you're really going to struggle, because you could be the best seller in the world. Like you can very eloquently present the product or the service, the features, the benefits, the pricing. But if the person that you're pitching to doesn't like you, you are not going to get the sale. And even if they do like you, but you can't close and ask for the money and get the order, you're not going to make the sale. So all of those three things are necessary. You can't really, you can probably get by with one or two, but if you're going to ultimately be world class at selling, which is kind of what you asked about, I think you need all three of those things. I think you need to be a great relationship builder. I think you need to be solid at presenting the product, the service, the features, the benefits, the price, and also be able to close. Those are the three things together.
It's funny when you talk about communication and the communication skills, how much they're actually a fundamental part of everything. And maybe 6 months ago, I went on a presenting course, you know, for presenting to camera, and it was a friend of mine. He's an ex-TV presenter himself, and you know, he runs these courses. So I thought I'd do a lot of this kind of stuff. I've always kind of learnt on the go, so maybe I should have some formal brushing up. And literally, we sat down, and the first 7 or 8 things he says to me, right, we need to work on this. So tonality, smiling, you know, speaking at the right speed. And it immediately dawned on me, you know what, everything you've said, okay, it applies to presenting, obviously, hence why you're teaching me, but these are just, you know, the communication skills of life.
Sure.
You know, whether it's, even if you're on the telephone and somebody can't see you face to face, but, you know, you still need to have that tonality, that, you know, that speed of speech, you know, smiling, because if you're smiling, then you're kind of speaking better, aren't you, than if you sat with your thumb up your arse. And it's interesting when you actually take a step back, how much it impacts on every part of business and life.
Of course, 100%. And you know, it doesn't just stop with, in business, it doesn't just stop with selling. It's like your ability to communicate to, as your business grows, the people that work for you or that work in your team. Like the communication skills that you use with them are then going to affect their performance. And of course, you know, when you've got a team, a growing team as you have and I have, the ability to communicate effectively with them, because effectively they're doing 80%, probably more, as your team grows, they're doing 80% or even more of the day-to-day work in the business. So your ability to communicate to them will affect their performance, and of course then their ability to communicate to the prospects, the clients, the stakeholders in the business, the suppliers, that, like, it's all communication. It's all communication.
So tell us about setting up your own business after you left Andy. Why did you come to leave him? Because it was time to go on your own? Yeah,
it was always the intention, and in fairness, he taught me a great lesson, which I still, as a business owner now, abide by to this day, which is when I remember taking the job. I'm not going to go into the detailed backstory, but I dropped out of university after my mum had spent fortunes put me through university without a degree, and I went and took a job working for Andy. You know, on a, well, if he ever sees this, let's be honest, a pitiful salary at the time. But it was a sales job, so it was mostly commission based. But I remember him saying to me the first day, bear in mind, I'd left home, moved to Kent from Birmingham with nothing to take this job. And he was like, look, if you're still here in 3 years, I'm going to sack you. And I'm like, what? And what he meant was, like, I know that you are destined to, he already knew me and he knew that I really wanted to run my own business, and he was like, look, if I can get 3 great years out of you, then our business is going to have exploded, and if you can get 3 great years of education out of me, it's going to set you up for life. So that's a good deal for both of us. And within 18 months, I was ready to go off and set my own business, which I did. So I'd learned a lot, not just in sales, but also, as a speaker and as a trainer. Also around the marketing side, I'd done a lot of learning from Andy there as well. So all of those things together led me to my first real business, as I call it, which was as a freelance copywriter.
Did you hand your notice in, if you like, at that point, or did he say you're ready? You've done it.
No. So it was ultimately it was my decision, but it was the right time, I think, for for him, for the company, for me, and I think he would, if he was sat here, agree. Like we are still really good friends to this day. I was best man at his wedding. I definitely have him in my life as kind of like an older brother figure. He's been a mentor to me and a great friend, and it's not always been plain sailing in my business. There have definitely been some very tough times, and he's always been there for me. And I think it's important to not burn your bridges and to keep those relationships. And we still do a lot of business together to this day. In fact, Saturday, one of my companies is sponsoring and presenting at one of his events. So so I think it's important to keep those relationships. And so I set my business as a freelance copywriter based on the learning that I'd had working in his business. I'd observed, being in that for 18 months, there was a gap in the market that I had the skill to fill. Namely, a lot of people in that market, in that industry, did not have the ability to write and create marketing materials, and that was something that I got a natural flair for. Set the first business as a freelance copywriter, which means, for those that don't know, I was writing sales letters, email campaigns. I was effectively like a little agency, but I was the person delivering all the services. And that was the first business.
And it was just you were doing everything. You were going out, finding the clients and delivering the work. Yeah.
And again, coming back to your previous point, how did I get my clients? Relationships that I'd built since I was 12 years of age at Tony Robbins, all through my teens and working for Andy. Like I had what was I? I think I was probably 23, 24 when I set up that business. For a 23 or 24-year-old kid starting a business, I had contacts like nobody else. Like I could pick up the phone and speak to some of the biggest, it wasn't social media influencers then, but influencers in the industry. I could pick up the phone and speak to them because I'd put in the time. And that has always been and still is, I believe, the biggest competitive advantage I've got is that I've built relationships over 24 years now since I first went to Tony Robbins, and like that amount of relationships and goodwill that I've got in the locker, that's more valuable than any marketing budget or any amount of skill or knowledge or expertise in selling or running advertising campaigns or speaking. The relationships is the biggest asset I've got.
Actually, for me, this is a kind of a nice pause and an interesting point for you guys at home. Now, obviously, Nick and I have probably proactively, spent our careers trying to build great relationships with great people. But one of the things I remember Nick talking about on the first event of yours I came to, which was it's called your first 50K, and this is basically to take somebody who's got a monetizable skill out of employment, to be self-employed for themselves, starting their own business and getting to the first 50 grand of income. And one of the big questions is always, where do I get my customers from? And obviously, what you were teaching at that point was you already probably have in your phone or on your social media or whatever, all the people you need to actually get that first 50K of income. Whether it's the people directly or whether it's whether it's people that they know that they can introduce you to. But I think people always underplay the value of the relationships they've got with people. Yeah,
I agree, and I think the other, just to give you another view on that, I do think as well that you've got to go all in on the things that you're world class at, and you are a world class relationship builder. Like I remember us meeting at that event, and immediately there was a report. I wanted to listen to you. You've got some crazy fucking stories, but being in your presence, it was entertaining. It was like you've got this natural charisma, and because of that, you're great at building relationships. Now look, not everyone's got that. And so I think the key, and Gary Vaynerchuk talks about this a lot, is to be self-aware enough to know what your strengths are and what they're not. And so, like, you know, I've always been very good at building relationships with people, and that's definitely a skill set I've got. But there's also areas that I'm not so skilled in. So, you know, it makes sense for me to bring people into my company that fill those gaps. So, you know, if you're unbelievably good at like techie stuff, then the best way for you to probably build or generate inquiries or leads for your business is by doing the tech stuff that you know so well and doing it all online. If you're naturally a people person, great relationship builder, don't even think about trying to do any of the tech stuff. Get out and meet with people, because that's going to give you a much better chance of success. So I think it's being self-aware enough to know what you're great at and what you're not, and try and build your business around the skill that you possess that is your primary skill.
So go back to your copywriting skill then, how did the business scale? How did you go from one-man band copywriter to where we're sat today?
Yeah, I mean, like, again, first of all, I built the business based on things that I was very good at: relationship building and writing copy. Like, these are two skills that I had a natural flair for. There's also a load of things that I'm rubbish at. So, you know, I built it around that. You know, so to start off with, you know, it's funny that I talk about, you know, 50K being kind of like the first stage in terms of growing your income, being self-employed, which is what I was. It was 49,000, I often tell the story, 49,873 pounds, I think it was in my first year as a freelance copywriter. And, you know, then grew it a little bit to, like, you know, I think it was 80 grand in the second year. But then, of course, hit that ceiling that a lot of people do in business when they're starting out, which is I'm providing a service and I'm the one providing that service, no one else. I don't have a team of people. So I've run out of time to sell. And really that was when I got into the business I'm in now, which was, instead of me providing the service, I'm going to start teaching people how to do this for themselves. And I still provided the service as well, but by teaching classes and workshops on how to write copy and how to do marketing, first of all, it meant that I could teach a group of people. And our first training in 2009 was 8 people. And then it became 15 and 20 or 30 and 50 and 100. And, you know, last year we put, it was over 3,000 people through our training programs throughout the year. So we moved from that kind of like one-to-one model into a one-to-many. And even by doing that, even in the early days of doing that, so when we started running events for, you know, 10, 15, 20 people, there would still always be clients that didn't want to learn to do it for themselves. They wanted me to do it for them. But there were fewer of them and I could charge them more money. So instead of charging 800 or 1,000 or 1,500 quid for a project, I know I was charging 5 grand for a project. Or somebody could pay me 500 or 1,000 quid to come to a course, but I could put 15 or 20 people in that course at the same time.
When you changed the business model from obviously doing it for yourself to then teaching others, did you find an initial kind of backstepping income, as in almost like having to go one step backwards to go 2 steps forwards? Because I mean that's something I always find, you know, when I talk with a lot of people who feel like they've hit a ceiling, and it's like, well, you know, they know they've hit a ceiling, and they know or believe that the answer is that, you know, it's time to scale up, it's time to put a team around them, etc. Yeah. But then they're just so unprepared, you know, to take that step in income back and start to invest in some people or invest in marketing, you know, because they've got used to that level of income, and I guess, you know, they are their own worst enemy, and they're the ones inhibiting the growth.
Yeah, I think the key there really, and of course, as you know, Matt, we have clients that we work with in our mastermind who are just getting started. We have clients that have got to that kind of stage that I got to, 50, 60, 70, 80 grand a year, selling time for money, but that won't scale. So how do you jump to the next phase, which, you know, get into 6 figures, multi-6 figures in terms of annual revenue for your business? And your question, like, you know, do you sometimes have to take one step back to make 2 steps forward? And I think sometimes, but that wasn't the case for me, because I went, well, first of all, I couldn't afford to. So around this time I had, so my then fiance, now wife, was pregnant with our first child, who's now 10, and I had a wedding to pay for. So I couldn't afford to take a drop in income for future growth. So what I did was kind of maintain the foundations of the business, which was me doing work for other people, time for money, and then just had to find extra, you know, capacity, getting up earlier, stay up later, to do all the other stuff to grow, to start promoting and marketing the events. So we managed to, and you know, what I often say to people is, you know, let's say you're you're in situation A, which has got you so far, but you know you need to be in situation B to grow and scale, rather than just drop in A and jump into B, and then it's sink or swim. Like really putting a plan in place, sensible plan in place to transition from one to the other, where you kind of like, let's say you're making all your income from this and none of your income from this, rather than just dropping this one and jump into this one, like gradually transition from one to the other so that you can drop the stuff that got you started and move fully into the things that are going to allow you to scale. And I think that's a sensible way of doing it, rather than, again, it's a bit like the thinking of you're in employment, you want to start your own business, drop your employment completely, and then you've got to make it work, or you're completely screwed. And I just think it's bad advice, especially when, I think that's fine when you know, I'd often, if I do, we often get younger people coming to our events, you know, teenagers, people in their early 20s, they're asking me for advice on business. I'm like, look, if you're going to take any risks, do it now.
Yep.
Do it now, because once you've, you know, obviously not everyone takes this path, but once you've got kids, you're married, you've got a mortgage, you've got responsibilities, it is infinitely more difficult for you to take those risks. You know, people look at me now and go, oh, you take loads of risks in business. I'm like, I do, but I've got a foundation and a base, which means it allows me to do those things without risking the financial well-being of my family. Whereas, you know, like getting to the point which a lot of people do, they get to their late 20s, early 30s, maybe even 40s, and they've been in a job the whole life, and they've realised that that's not going to fulfil them anymore. But taking a leap from that job to follow their passion, start their own business, that's a big risk when you've got, I suppose, you've got a lot of responsibilities, and you've got a lot of people relying on you that if you fail, you know, it's going to let a lot of people down.
But I think as well, you know, as much as, you know, you might not want to be betting the ranch and, you know, risking the kids not having a roof over their head, I think this is also the point in your life where it's important to have the right partner on board with you as well. You know, okay, sure. Yes, not that she's going to allow you to go and have you all moving into a homeless shelter, but I see so many, whether it's friends or people who just, you know, want to talk to me about, you know, their problems and their advice, who are able to make changes which wouldn't be, you know, yes, there might be some risk involved, but not astronomical risk in the context of their circumstances, but all, you know, always held back by, you know, by a shitty relationship or an unsupporting partner. I think, you know, that's so important to, you know, to have that right person on the journey with you. Yeah,
it is, absolutely, and I'm very, very lucky. My wife's incredibly supportive. I mean, I've put her through hell over the last. We met at university, so I was like, what, 20 years of age, she was 19. So before all this happened, really, we met. So, you know, she's been on the journey, and she's been there when, you know, things aren't working out and we're absolutely skint. And of course, she's had all the reward and upside as well. But always been incredibly supportive, and, you know, I think the dynamic we've got works for us. It might not work for everybody. I think, yeah, having somebody that's supportive, but also getting the dynamic that works for you is really important.
So what's your advice again for people watching this or listening to this of what is that right dynamic? I mean, my maybe oversimplistic attitude has been, and I've only been in, let's say, 2 long-term relationships where, you know, so my daughter's mum, who I was married to, and somebody else who I was with for like 5 or 6 years. So this has been the only time in my life that I guess it's really mattered. But my rule was just always very simple, that, you know, my work is my work, and I will never discuss, I don't mean I'll never discuss work with you, but I'll never debate money with you. You know, because when things are good, you can have what you want. But I'll take the risks that might mean we'll have nothing, and you don't get a say in the fact of whether or not I'm risking the fact that we've got nothing, because it was me that let you have a great time when we had a great time, so I'm going to go and take those risks. And, you know, what I always see it a lot with businesses who come to me for funding, for example, where, you know, they might need to give a second charge on a house or put up some kind of family asset where the wife would need to consent to them doing that. I say wife for sexist reasons, could be the other way around, but, you know, but that partner then doesn't allow them to do it, you know, which then, you know, then materially inhibits that, you know, that business moving forward. But, you know, they wouldn't even be living in that house if it wasn't for the risk that the partner's taken. My view, and it has always been for me, I'm going to do what the fuck I want, and, you know, and if that means we lose our money and you fuck off and leave me, well, you shouldn't have been with me in the first place, should you? Because you were probably here for the wrong reasons. But you've probably got a more pragmatic and fair answer to that.
Well, maybe. And by the way, I'm definitely the last person on the planet that should be giving out relationship advice. Let me just get that out there to begin with. But what I'd say is, like, bottom line, I genuinely don't believe there's a right way. Like, you know, you've shared your dynamic, which is your way, and I'm not remotely surprised knowing you. That's how you roll. You know, my dynamic's probably slightly different with me and my wife, Nat. You know, we've been together since we were kids. I mean, like, when I say kids, 19, 20. She was 19, I was 20, so we were very, very young. And so, like, we've never, I suppose, in the early days, like, you know, I had my job, she had hers, and you know, we didn't live together or anything. And then, you know, then I started the business and she had her job, and so we kind of, you know, but then as the business became more successful, it meant that she didn't have to work in a job if she didn't want to, and then we had the kids. So it's, you know, and I think you get to a point where I think that the thing that's most important is trust, really. And I'm not talking about trust in the relationship, but trust in the other person and the vision of what you're trying to achieve. It's like, look, I know that Nat trusts me completely when it comes to making decisions about the business, and you know, she's never run her own business, she's not that way inclined, so that helps actually. I think for us, it works for us, that, you know, anything regarding financials or business decisions, it's all on me, so that helps. But equally, I think there are some, you could probably point to some amazing partnerships, either business partnerships or husband and wife partnerships that run a business together, where they could not do it, one person could not do it without the other because they have complementary skills. I suppose some people need that partner. I don't know about you, but I've been in business partnerships, and they served me at the time when I probably didn't have all the skills that I needed. And you know, now I don't think there's, and of course I do have a couple of businesses, and one of them is a partnership. And even in that partnership, we have a very clear understanding of who's responsible for what, and who's trusted to do certain things, and who ultimately makes the decisions. So I think you've got to understand yourself as well. Like I've been there, and I'm not going to be happy, my personality style, I am not going to be happy in a business relationship where I don't make the decisions. It's just not going to work. But other people need somebody to bounce off to make the decisions. That's just how they're wired. So I think you've got to, it comes back to what we said earlier, it's self-awareness. Yeah. Knowing what you need and what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, and finding somebody to, I guess, plug the gaps that you can't.
I mean, I have some businesses I'm involved in where the partnerships to a degree, let's say, you know, other substantial shareholders or people running them. I think, I mean, yes, I'm obviously always somebody who likes to make decisions, but I think, you know, one of the most important things for me in partnerships is that, like you say, there's a clear divide of what you're both doing, and you both do it. Yeah. So that, you know, you're both benefiting each other. You know, times where I've struggled in relationships, you know, business relationships, is where that other person, you know, just basically wants me to come and do the same thing as them. And it's like, what the fuck is the point in this? You know, you do that, I'll do that. You know, and I'd rather you went and did it and made the mistakes and fucked it up, than you actually bring me along to do it with you. Because if I'm going to do it with you, I may as well just have 100% of the pie. Yeah.
What I notice, having worked with thousands of people who are in business, those that are in partnerships, what I notice in most cases is that the truth is, and it's hard to hear for a lot of people, they're in a partnership because they don't back themselves to do it on their own. And so in that case, they need to be twice as successful just to get the same amount out of it. So you'd be better off doing it on your own, really. The exceptions to that are where one partner fulfills something that the other can't. And so I was in a business partnership where it lasted for as long as it lasted because that was the case. And it probably only lasted as long as it lasted because that ceased to be the case. Where we're like, actually, I'm capable of doing this on my own and so are you. So now we've learned from each other, we can go our separate ways, which we did. And we're still mates, so it's all good. And I think, yeah, you got to ask yourself before you go into a partnership, am I doing this because I'm not brave enough, or don't back myself enough to do it myself, or are we doing this because we actually complement one another? And I think if the latter's true, then go for it. But in most cases, it's the former, and they're doing it for certainty. Yeah. And like I say, you need to do twice as much to get the same result. So, yeah, for me, like, people don't back themselves enough. I think that's the truth. You know, you're the kind of person that will, you know, probably risk everything for a big win, and I'm probably not far behind you in that regard, but you know, I'm probably like you said, maybe a little bit more pragmatic, but that said, I think most of the people listening to this, watching this, are probably the other way, and they're probably too risk averse to really be able to get the results they're looking for.
Well, one of the things I always say as well, and I think it particularly applies, like you say, to most of the people watching or listening to this, is that they talk about the risks involved, but the reality is they're not fucking risks. Like I always say to someone,
not in your world.
No, but I'm interested to debate. I'm interested to debate this with you as well, and because I'll always say to someone, let's say, and this isn't talking down to any income bracket or any job. I say, look, if you're a 20 grand a year employee, in an admin role or in this business, and you've got a passion that you really want to fulfill, and something you think you can do, go and do it, because how badly can it go wrong? Don't tell me that if it goes wrong, you can't find your way back into a 20 grand role. Okay, look, if you're a managing partner of a law firm at 200 grand a year and you leave that, then and it all goes wrong, then you might struggle to find your way back into those kind of roles. But if you're Joe Bloggs, 18, 22, 25 years old, I would be very surprised if anyone in that position is earning or has something around them that they couldn't immediately or pretty immediately walk back into if they put the effort into. And therefore, that's why when I say it's not really a risk to take, it's not like someone who's got loads of assets and they're risking it and going to go down to nothing. These are the people that really don't have much to lose in the first place. So go for that win, go for that level of happiness improvement.
I'm going to give you a completely opposite view. This is interesting because I go, and again, let's not make this about money and income, but it serves the purpose of the example. If somebody's working an admin job on 20 grand a year, chances are they don't have the skill or the self-belief to go and, if it is follow a passion, start a business. If someone's a partner in a law firm on 200 grand a year, the reason they managed to get there was because they have a high degree of skill and self-belief, and they've probably on the journey built up some assets, so they're actually not as reliant upon that income for their well-being as somebody who's on 20 grand a year in an admin job. So I suppose it could work either way. Like I would say, if someone's a 200 grand a year partner in a law firm, that person has a skill set and a mindset that is extremely valuable. Like somebody walks through the door into my company tomorrow and they go, look, I've been a partner in law. I don't need a law person in my business, but that's not the point. They go, look, I love what you do. I want to be part of it. How can we work together? I'm going, this is a very well educated, very highly skilled, very self-confident person, great communication skills, otherwise you wouldn't have got there. So like I go, there's a role for that in my business and of course many businesses. And funnily enough, I remember earlier this month, we were sat in Mastermind and you actually said, if I could find the person that does that, they'd be worth, I'd pay them 250 grand a year to do that job. And you go, and because they're that highly skilled. Yeah. So finding a role, like let's say you were that person and you went and started a business and it went to shit. Going and finding another role at 200 grand a year, you do easily because you're so valuable. And there's less people at that end of the market, whereas, I guess at the bottom end of the market, if you want to call it that, it's like saturated, so it's probably harder to find work. So, and that's why, coming back to something we were talking about earlier, that is why, and I know it's cliche, but the reason it's cliche is because it's true, that the investment in yourself and in your personal development, improving your communication skills and your mindset and your skill set and all of these things will always be the best investment because it makes you more valuable. And that means like I've never had a problem finding work. Now, obviously, I've had my own business since I was in my early 20s, but before that, I never had a problem finding work. I never had a problem, even getting a job working behind the bar or as a waiter in a restaurant. I know because I had great skills, great communication skills. I never had a problem. I remember I was at university, everyone goes in as a placement, and the university are going, you're probably going to have to interview for 30, 40, maybe even 50 placements before you get one. And I come back and go, well, I've already got one. And they go, well, you can't have because you haven't been on the interviews. I go, well, I didn't need to because I already know somebody through the Tony Robbins world who's offered me a placement on more money than everyone else is getting because I've already got the relationships and I've already got the communication skills. So that is why the skills we've talked about right at the start here and throughout of building relationships and being a great communicator make you so valuable in this world that you'll always succeed. You'll never go hungry, you'll never go, like once you learn how to sell, you got that skill, you'll never go hungry. Your family will never go hungry, you'll never miss a mortgage payment. Once you know how to sell, you're valuable. You walk into my office, you've got high skills in sales, you got a job straight away.
100%.
Because it's just the most valuable skill.
I want to talk to you about mentors and mentorship.
Yeah.
Because something I always talk about is that whilst looking back, I will have had informal mentors over the years. It was really only over the last year or two I've kind of understood the formal concept of having a mentor, you know, what they can do for you, and then actively going out to seek them. And I think as well, you know, something I always say is that maybe it's a British thing, but I feel that there's this belief in business that, you know, once you've started a business, the fact that you've started a business makes you a business person who therefore knows everything, and it's almost, you know, showing yourself up to be, you know, to be going out asking for advice and asking for skill sets, and, you know, and when you start to understand the concept, you realize how fucking ridiculous it is when you say, well, why does a top tennis player have a coach and a team of people around? So why does this not translate to business? Obviously, this is something you more formally deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I guess, talk to me a bit about mentors, mentorship, and how someone should look for a mentor, and as a mentor, how you would behave to your mentee.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the kind of debate, I guess, between informal versus formal. I had both probably from an early age, I suppose, like, you know, going to events. It's not one-to-one conversations, but it's still, I'm at the time at 12 years of age, my mum was paying for me to fly all over the world and attend these events. So that's kind of formal. But then, you know, when I met Andy, he kind of, I went and worked for his company. So that's an informal, I guess, mentorship arrangement. Learned a lot from him. So I think it can be either. What I would say is, I mean, you made the point about, you know, top sports people have mentors and coaches and are striving to be better. And I think actually the reason I think you nailed it culturally, you know, when somebody starts a business, to go and seek advice on how to do that bigger, better seems to be perceived to be a weakness. And I think that's why a lot of people don't get the success and the growth they want. I've always been, you know, had informal and formal mentors, and you know, it's always served me very, very well. I don't think it's a coincidence that most of the people that are at the top of the game in business have had that. Funnily enough, we had, I don't know if you even knew this, we had Lord Sugar at one of our events a couple of years ago.
I know you did it before.
I interviewed him, not in this format, it was on stage, but very similar. And actually one of the audience members asked about who are your mentors, and he kind of like went, well, I haven't ever had one. Like, what's that? Well, he kind of almost, it was alien to him, the concept. But then when he really thought about it, he went, well, I suppose in the early days when I just started, I don't remember which company it was, let's say it was Amstrad. When I just started Amstrad, and there was another guy who was in a similar business, and, you know, he was like 30 years older than me, and I kind of like went and visited him and asked him questions and picked his brain, and he kind of told me what he'd done to build. So he went, that was kind of how so I think it's always been there, that people have always had, in many cases, informal mentors or mentorship arrangements. And I think it's become more common now, and more fashionable, if you like, to have formal arrangements. I mean, you know, look at top sports people now. I mean, how many mentors, coaches, psychologists has like Andy Murray got? Like, he's got a team of them, right? Like, back in the 60s, the top tennis player in the world probably didn't have any of those. They might not have even had a coach. Really. So I think it's become more common, more fashionable, more widely used. You know, same thing in all sports, and probably the same in business as well. You know, there's now a whole industry, which of course I'm part of, which is the industry of imparting knowledge and best practice and mentoring and coaching and helping people accelerate their growth, their development, whether that's, of course, for me, it's people that are in business in the expert industry. But, you know, there's a whole industry around accelerating people's development in sport, and of course, you know, there's the whole personal training and fitness and nutrition world, which is really the same thing but for people's health and well-being. So there's, you know, I think people are now becoming more familiar and more comfortable with the idea of investing time, money in advice, mentorship, coaching, whatever you want to call it.
And do you think there's a right answer of how the mentor or the mentee, you know, behaves or interacts, or is it really just a matter of, you know, finding someone that you would want to learn from, or finding someone that you're happy to teach to, and just hanging out. Like, I mean, I look at some of mine. I mean, obviously, I've come to a formal mastermind type thing with you, but aside from that, you know, people I would consider mentors. You know, ultimately they're mates as well, and it really just is. Should we have dinner next week? Let's go and chew the fat over a bottle of wine, and it's, you know, it's just completely informal. And
I think both are really healthy to have both, and I definitely have both of those things. And I think the reason I say both are really healthy is for these reasons. I think if all you're doing is formal, it is still quite difficult sometimes to really get below the surface. And so you'll get that by having a nice meal and a bottle of wine with, you know, with a friend who, you know, maybe has achieved something in their life or business that you haven't yet. I think you can get to a deeper level. But also the action of investing money in that mentorship advice makes it far more likely you're actually going to do something with it.
Yeah.
Like, how many times have you been, I mean, I'll own it, I've been given advice from people that I really should listen to because they know a lot better than I do, and then not done anything with that advice. I haven't acted upon it or implemented it. And the truth is, even though it was smart, I didn't value it because I hadn't paid for it. Whereas, you know, when I've spent, and by the way, significant sums of money for advice and support and mentoring and these kind of things, I mean, I invest huge sums, 6 figures a year now on all of those, you know, on advice, mentoring and learning. And like, when I'm paying for it, like, let's be honest, it stings a bit. And when it stings a bit, it means that I'm valuing it, because I go, right, I'm spending this money, I'm investing this money, I'd better be getting a return on it, otherwise it's a waste. So I'm more likely to use what I've learned or what I've been told from that mentor or that coach or from that training. So I do think that investing money makes you value it more. I also think that having an informal approach to it also, I think both are very valuable in their own way.
Nick, it's been a good chat. Probably longer than we both thought, and it's definitely sparked a round two for me, I'm sure. So I hope I can find some time in your diary over the next few months to carry on, because I've got so many things I wanted to talk about, and talking to you now has made me make a load of notes of other things we're going to talk about too. Guys at home watching this, or people listening on whatever platform you're on, obviously something we've started doing recently is trying to give you a kind of a question of the day or question of the podcast. So I think a nice thing to talk about, which we've just finished on, is obviously mentorship. So you guys watching, comment below or send me a DM or write a review on iTunes. Talk to me about mentors and mentorship. Have you had one? Would you like one? Who would you like to use? Have you had any good experiences, any bad experiences? You know, I want to know what you guys think and what's been working and what hasn't been working for you. Nick, give yourself a plug before we leave. How do we find you on Instagram, on the web?
Yeah, sure. Probably for me, predominantly Facebook. So, you know, you can just search me on Facebook, Nick James.
Is that because you're the older demographic?
Yeah, exactly.
Can we not find you on Snap?
37 now, mate. I'm getting a bit grey and stuff. Yeah, again, Facebook, LinkedIn, and well, you can see what we're up to and what's happening in our world. expertempires.co.uk.
Perfect. And guys, make sure you subscribe. If you've never followed me on social as well, I'm the Matt Haycox, TheMattThay, on pretty much all the channels. So follow me, Insta, Snap, even TikTok now. You'll see me doing some embarrassing maneuvers on there. So make sure you follow. Nick, thanks a lot for being here today. It's been fantastic.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.